if you've just joined us now. Today, we will be talking about researcher well-being and how to deal with imposter syndrome. We will also have time for questions at the end, so please make a note of anything that you'd like to discuss further, and there'll be time for you to submit your questions towards the end of the presentation. Okay, so today we will be talking about mental health in academia. I'll give you an overview of what's happening in terms of mental health in academia. Then we will discuss how to understand and tackle imposter syndrome. And finally, we'll discuss some steps that you can take to support your own mental well-being so that you can thrive in your research journey. In recent years, research policy officers and academics have increasingly voiced worries about the mental well-being of academics. It's estimated that globally, 30 to 50% of scholars experience mental health issues, which is more than the percentage of people outside of academia. Also, women tend to experience more stress and juggle more in their work-life balance. However, the official registered number of mental health problems for students and staff remains quite low. So this points to the fact that people are not talking about their issues and not seeking help for them. Now, even if the causal connections between the characteristics of academic work environments and researcher mental health are fuzzy, it seems likely that the university environment does partly cause stress and other mental health issues. It's not just that people prone to stress and mental health issues are drawn to academia. At the same time, it's becoming relatively clear that academia is inviting and rewarding people who are very demanding of themselves, who are pedantic, extremely hardworking, and very ambitious. Universities should therefore also be taking responsibility and, for example, have a risk management approach to mental health issues. We should not see researcher mental health as only an individual problem. It's important not to pathologize normal mood fluctuations and reactions to the normal challenges of life. Academia does present some very specific challenges for any individual's mental health. Academic work, for a start, is intellectually challenging. It includes ambitious goals, and it occurs in a context that often fosters strong expectations of long hours and excellent performance. There are numerous teamwork challenges, such as conflicts between overlapping work roles. So, for example, the same person that's your colleague is also your competitor, and the person who's your mentor could also be your manager. Sometimes there can be mutual complex dependencies between junior and senior researchers. Many academics end up working on a string of short-term contracts. The environment is hyper-competitive, while tasking people with competing and management and administration on top of research. And often your leaders are training. Causes you to have less support from family and friends. Also, research topics related to, for example, environmental issues, criminality, or psychological trauma can themselves induce anger, sadness, and frustration. And of course, maintaining a work-life balance is always a constant challenge. A study by Guthrie and colleagues from 2017 shows that some PhD students' mental health issues consist of high work demands, work-life control, support from supervisors, 37%, but they don't talk openly about their challenges. According to another study in 2017 by Levesque and colleagues, 51% of university students had experienced at least 2 symptoms of bad mental health in the past few weeks. They also found that organizational policies were associated with the prevalence of mental health challenges. For example, how a university enables you to have a functioning work-family life balance or not. Suffice to say, therefore, that academic environments are specific and very different from any other work setting. In a nutshell, they induce high levels of stress and high levels of satisfaction at the same time. One mental health challenge seems particularly relevant and common in terms of academia, and that's imposter syndrome. But what do we mean by such a syndrome, and how can we tackle it? Here are some examples. 2 years after publishing On the Origin of Species, Charles Darwin stated, "One lives only to make blunders." Albert Einstein's been quoted for saying, "The exaggerated esteem in which my life work is held makes me very ill at ease. I feel compelled to think of myself as an involuntary swindler." And while working on The Grapes of Wrath, John Steinbeck wrote, "I am assailed by my own ignorance and inability," arguing that sometimes I seem to do a good little piece of work, but when it's done, it slides into mediocrity. So, imposter syndrome refers to an experience where you think you've only succeeded in something owing to luck or the goodwill of other people, and not because of your talent and qualifications. It's a term introduced in 1978 by psychologists Pauline Rose Clance and Suzanne Imes. They noticed that many of their clients were high-achieving women who, despite their achievements, believed they were not really successful and had only fooled everyone to think so. Later research has shown that this feeling isn't limited to women or only to academics, but is actually experienced by people of all professions. It's important to note that imposter syndrome is not a mental disease, but it is a real experience and a phenomenon that resonates with many people. So you don't have imposter syndrome in the same way that you would have a virus or a disease. It's a label for certain experiences that you might recognize in yourself to some degree. Before self-proclaiming yourself as suffering from imposter syndrome, remember that most people experience some self-doubt from time to time. Nobody feels certain of their abilities all the time, and it's not actually needed for you to be successful in academia. Actually, it's quite the opposite. With imposter syndrome specifically, we're talking about something more than fleeting feelings of inadequacy. Instead, it refers to strong, persistent feelings of your achievements not being deserved and having constant worries that you'll be exposed as a fraud. However, even if your experiences are not that dramatic, awareness of the phenomenon can help you have a stronger self-esteem. Different scholars have defined the imposter phenomenon in different ways. The imposter scale developed by Clance includes statements such as, "I'm afraid that people will find out I'm not as capable as they think I am," and "my success has been due to luck." In 1985, Harvey and Katz defined the imposter phenomenon as having 3 distinct and different aspects. 1, the belief that one has fooled other people. 2, the fear of being exposed or someone finding out. And 3, not attributing successes to one's own skills and talents. In fact, it's often claimed that at the root of the imposter experience is a failure to internalize your own success. In other words, you have problems believing that you've achieved something because you are skilled and smart and not because of some other external reason. Valerie Young has further identified patterns in people who experience imposter feelings. Some people are perfectionists who set high goals and are not happy unless they achieve everything. Some are experts who feel the need to know everything due to a fear of looking stupid. Natural geniuses are used to achieving things easily, and so they think that they're not good enough if they have to work hard. Superwomen and men end up pushing themselves very hard to succeed in all aspects of life just to show that they're not imposters. And soloists are people who believe that they have to do everything on their own. Vergawe and colleagues argue in their 2015 paper that imposter phenomenon is a maladaptive personality style, including over-preparation, low self-efficacy beliefs, and maladaptive perfectionism, which is the expectation that one needs to be perfect, but never feeling like one has achieved anything. In other words, people with this personality style are very demanding of themselves. They spend way too much time and effort doing their tasks because of a fear that they won't be perfect, and they don't believe in their own capacity to achieve things. Also, Sakulku and Alexander in 2011 wrote about imposterism as a personality trait. Individuals who have the imposter experience have strong feelings of their achievements not being deserved, and they worry that they'll be exposed as a fraud. This causes distress and maladaptive behavior. Sakulku and Alexander in 2011, as well as Clance in 1985, have talked about the imposter cycle, with other scholars also writing about similar patterns. What this is that people with imposter experiences tend to set very high goals for themselves and then either over-prepare or they postpone doing what they have to do to tackle the task. They deny positive feedback and attribute all success to external reasons. And then when they do succeed, after putting way more hours and effort into a task than anyone else would have ever asked them to, it then causes them to reason that if they had not over-prepared, they wouldn't have done well. So you should stay very aware of whether you do use an unreasonable amount of time to do your tasks to cover up your supposed so-called incompetence. So what can you do to tackle your imposter experiences? Firstly, you can pay attention to behaviors that tend to maintain the imposter experience. People prone to imposter experiences often strive to hide their imperfections by staying away from situations where they suspect that these limitations would show up to others. It's actually necessary, though, to go out of your comfort zone and to take risks. On a related note, for an over-preparator who can't imagine doing anything with an it's good enough mindset, then just the idea of forcing themselves to cut down time they spend doing something can make them feel deeply uncomfortable. However, only by challenging yourself and forcing yourself to cut down the time that you would normally spend on something would you be able to prove to yourself that you don't need to work 3 times as much as others to succeed. Another common habit is engaging in intellectual inauthenticity, for example. By not telling someone about your ideas. Many people with imposter experiences feed their own feelings of intellectual fraudulence by not stepping up and not openly displaying their talents. If you're not showing your true abilities, you never really then get feedback from others that would counter affect these feelings. So push yourself to open your So push yourself, try to take predicting failure than when you, because of believing that if you don't into this kind of thinking of predicting failure, how it will go, but you've really true catastrophe. Some people assume that real success is easy and effortless. Many have inherited from their families or culture the belief that there is such a thing as being naturally intelligent. Academia can also kind of feed this mindset that real success comes very easily, thus subscribing to this myth of natural genius. The belief in natural intelligence is connected with thinking that you should succeed without having to work too much. Otherwise, then you're not truly bright. Hardworking people then easily start to think that their diligence proves that they don't actually have any natural talent. And fearing that they might come across as not being naturally smart, they end up trying to hide the fact that they work hard instead. Imposter phenomenon is also related to not being able to integrate professional praise with your self-concept and your self-image. No amount of external proof of your success will help if you don't truly feel that the praise is well-deserved, or if you deny all positive feedback or successes. So pay attention to whether you tend to disregard your success in case there is any gap between your actual performance and your self-imposed standards and expectations. Also, try to celebrate your wins. Celebrate getting that particularly difficult statistical analysis done. Reward yourself for finally submitting that paper. Acknowledge that you finished a long and difficult PowerPoint presentation. Go through your small wins daily by writing them down or speaking to someone so that they really sink in for you. Sometimes people with imposter experience hide a secret fantasy also of how unique and special they are. This kind of fantasy induces shame and guilt, which is then covered up by denying their successes. So developing a realistic self-image is crucial. Nothing is black and white. You are neither perfect nor a complete failure. And finally, focus on normalizing your experiences throughout your PhD and your research journey. Just because you feel overwhelmed because of your research, it doesn't mean that you have imposter syndrome. It's absolutely normal, and it's part of the process to sometimes feel bad or to feel a bit small. Criticism is completely normal, and it is also completely normal to sometimes feel bad for it. Now that we've spent some time talking about imposter experiences, it's time to widen the landscape a little bit and discuss more generally what you can do to ensure that your well-being stays good and you're able to thrive throughout your research journey. Now, please bear in mind that even if bad days are part of life, prolonged suffering is a reason to seek help from a professional. If you notice that you're feeling anxious or sad, you're losing sleep, or conversely that you're sleeping all the time and always feeling tired, if you're losing your appetite or eating constantly for 2 weeks or any longer period, then it's really time to contact a service close to you, such as your GP or your university healthcare system. If you're not sure whether you're calling the right place, I would highly recommend that you call anyway, and they will be able to redirect you to the right service as necessary. Remember also that there's absolutely no shame in seeking professional help. First of all, I encourage you to pay attention to certain myths about academia and to bust them. Then you can move to think more deeply about what well-being means to you and how you can enhance it for yourself. So we might harbor and live by these myths without even knowing it, having acquired these beliefs from outside and within academia. One of these myths is the belief that academia always includes suffering and that it's normal to always be unhappy and on the verge of a burnout. There are academics who believe that some level of burnout is actually an integral part of doing research and being in academia. And some academic cultures even idealize suffering as a sign that you're actually doing the right thing and that you're just adjusting to the surrounding norms and expectations of academia. This narrative really, really needs to be challenged. It's toxic, it's harmful, it encourages people not to take any action to stop their suffering. And in many instances, it's inaccurate, it's not true. It doesn't mean that you have to suffer in academia to be successful. Another myth is the belief that you need to live and die by academia and shape your entire life around it. Academics often identify strongly with their research, their department, and/or their position, and that can sometimes be a good thing to boost your confidence, but equating yourself with your work predisposes you for constant ups and downs in your self-esteem. It makes you vulnerable to the belief that when you fail at something, it means that you fail as a person, which is simply not true. There's a really strong temptation to take your university life way too personally, and even the assumption that unless you do so, you can't fully and really succeed. So again, please challenge this idea for yourself and pay attention instead to how many successful scholars there are out there who actually do have very healthy personal lives and hobbies, and who know how to draw a very firm, healthy line between work and personal free time. Thirdly, there's the myth that the more you work, the more successful you're going to be. This also is not true. The hours that you spend at a desk does not directly correlate with what you actually get done. You can effectively focus on the same task for a certain focused number of hours a day, and then get the adequate rest that you need for you to be able to do your best. So don't think that your concentration is unlimited, because it is, and it is just as necessary for you to get that rest that you need on a physical level and on a mental level. Academia is also great at feeding that myth that you need to be incredibly smart to succeed. Universities tend to have these strong hero cults, right? Like every field has certain rock stars who are put high up on a pedestal and almost kind of worshipped. Hierarchical thinking and hyper competition causes people to believe that they must have genius level intelligence to also make it and to achieve that same level of success. This can induce impossible pressures that aren't helpful for creating a successful and enjoyable academic journey and career. So instead of worshiping these geniuses who made it and constantly comparing ourselves to others, perhaps what we can do instead is to learn to promote other kinds of virtues in students and scholars. For example, curiosity, persistence, networking skills, motivation, helpfulness, and creativity. These skills shift perceptions in a way that focusing only on natural born intelligence does not. Finally, the last academic myth we'll address is that of a lone rider who tackles everything alone. This kind of soldier mentality invites you to hide your bad days and struggles in the false belief that nobody else has similar issues, and to feel shame for having these issues and these bad days. The truth of the matter is other people, everyone else also has these bad days and struggles. They're just not telling you. Next, we're going to talk about some thought and behavior patterns that can lead to anxiety and depression, and that academia unfortunately tends to feed and reward. I'll then also share some tips on how to tackle these patterns and enhance your well-being. So these patterns include, most importantly, perfectionism and self-criticism. And that's about demanding a lot from yourself and only paying attention to where you don't succeed. Do you ever notice yourself always expecting a lot from yourself and never seeing what it is that you have done and succeeded at and achieved? Do you find mistakes or failures in everything you do? Do you tend to not believe good feedback or even actively try to explain it away by saying that it's somehow not real or that the people don't really mean it? Start to deliberately pay attention to these things on a daily basis. Make it clear to yourself what kind of performance is good enough for you and your supervisor or your employer, and normalize for yourself the idea that sometimes good enough is really all you need. You don't have the time and the energy to be excellent at everything, and nobody's really expecting you to be perfect at everything. So find and define an area where you can begin to relax your standards slightly. Remember that being incompetent and feeling incompetent are two completely different things. You are not the same as your wins or your losses. Your over-demanding mind might tell you otherwise, but remember that this is simply not the truth. Make sure that you don't overgeneralize single failures and overestimate the number of mistakes that you think you've made. Now, taking criticism is an important skill in building a realistic self-image, and it's helpful in academia. You have to accept that sporadic failure is part of the academic journey, and there's no way you can completely avoid criticism, rejections, or feeling like someone else is ahead of you. But true winners are people who don't give up, no matter how many times they've been hit. A positive attitude to rejections, mistakes, and criticism allows you to see them as chances to grow and to become better. That being said, not all criticism is justified or constructive, and some comments absolutely deserve to be left behind and not waste your time on. Sometimes you do need to stand up and make clear where your boundaries are. A growth-oriented mindset where you focus on constantly becoming more expert in your field is better for your mental health than a focus on concrete achievements alone. So celebrate chances to learn and grow, and don't focus only on celebrating the standalone occasions where you're perfectly nailing it. You could, for example, keep a written record of positive feedback. Note down positive comments that you're receiving and how they felt. Note your responses. In what ways did you negate or mitigate positive feedback? And how could you let yourself feel it more and really let it sink in? Be careful if you regularly think that the ultimate satisfaction in life comes from concrete external achievements alone, such as getting papers published or being invited to speak at conferences. Wherever you think you're going, you will never fully be there. There's always going to be a new goal looming on the horizon. There's always going to be a new destination that you need to work towards. So stop making yourself live in this loop and getting trapped in this cycle and focusing only on destinations. Instead, learn to really enjoy the journey and find ways to be more present in each moment. Focus on what you're doing today and what's making you happy right now. On a similar note, instead of always worrying ahead of yourself, worrying about a destination, worrying about the future, focus on what you can control and change right now in this time. What kinds of adjustments could you make to ensure that you're able to enjoy your life right now and not just struggle through it or survive it? What tasks or responsibilities can you give up and let go, for example? You know, we often do things just to keep busy rather than because they're really that important. That being said, also reassess how you're actually spending and using your time. Is it truly productive for your work? Or is it offering the rest and recharging that you need? For example, set a timer to see how much time you spend each day just mindlessly scrolling through social media feeds. You might be surprised at how much time you're investing in this in a way that's neither helping your work nor offering you the proper rest that your body and your mind needs. You can also play an active part to nurture an environment and a community of caring, positive feedback and belonging. make sure that you're not alone and take the steps to help yourself in this. If you'd like your colleagues to ask how you're doing, then start by asking them how they're doing. Try to have as many open and honest conversations as you can with the people around you. Perhaps your university offers some kind of buddy or mentor system. So see if you can sign up for something like that so that you have a peer that you can turn to and talk to. Share your worries with your colleagues and your friends, or even your supervisors and your project team before they grow too big. By talking with other people, you might realize that they also make similar mistakes and face similar rejections and are dealing with similar issues. In turn, you can also mentor other younger researchers. This will also help to acknowledge your own experience and help you to see for yourself how far you've come. Take part in the social activities offered by your university. Even if you're busy, taking 1 or 2 hours out to join a Zoom social or some kind of social activity or class could make a big difference for making new and supportive friends and connections. Sometimes, and you've probably come across this, academics use quite harsh language against each other and then poorly try to cover this up as academic debate. But in reality, the harshest voice but it can be really helpful to try to start exposing yourself, going beyond your comfort zone and taking some risks. Recognize that all of us have both strengths and weaknesses. And what is a strength or a weakness very much depends on the specific context that you're in. You don't need to be absolutely perfect and have only strengths in order to succeed in academia. So sometimes moving beyond your comfort zone and learning to make a mistake along the way can actually be a really liberating experience. And it's a really powerful and effective and fast way to learn new skills. Also, stop comparing yourself to others. Try to see yourself as either just an individual doing your own thing independently without a need for comparison, or see yourself as being in collaboration with others. In some ways, your competitors and you are actually in the same boat, and it's important to remind yourself of that from time to time. It's good to keep in mind that most comparisons are actually twisted and unrealistic in one way or another, because you either end up putting yourself on a pedestal above others, or you end up exaggerating their successes and your failures. So it's not very accurate and not at all a useful yardstick by which to measure your own progress. Try also not to think about academia in black and white terms, like success versus failure, acceptance versus rejection. The more you're able to see your work as journey with different kinds of turns and ups and downs, and recognize yourself as a complex, multifaceted person, the easier it will be to tackle challenges as they arise. Occasionally feeling upset or feeling low in self-esteem are completely normal reactions to setbacks. Feeling strong and successful all the time is not realistic, and it's also not a key goal. Modern society does really tend to promote this ideal of invincible individuals who successfully and happily tackle every challenge. But this just isn't a mindset for a balanced and happy life. Humility and seeing your limits are just as important strengths as well. So make sure that you also leverage on them. It's also really important to let yourself feel the negative feelings as they arise and not to try to ignore or push them away. Acknowledge what it is that you're feeling and then let these feelings go. This is a much healthier way than trying to ignore the feelings completely or to force yourself to feel the other extreme, which is to be completely positive all the time. That's also not realistic. And sometimes all you need to give your well-being a boost is to take a look at your daily physical routines. This sounds really obvious, but a lot of long-term deep psychotherapy and therapeutic methods consists of talking about things like drinking enough water, getting enough sleep, getting adequate exercise, eating proper nutritious foods. So take care of your basic needs. Neglecting sleep, food, and exercise is a definite sign that you are on your way to burning out and that you need to pause whatever it is that you're doing and get some help, or to start taking steps to address these basic physical needs. You really cannot take shortcuts and take time away from your basic bodily physical needs. And if you prioritize your work in this way, it's a really short-sighted way of approaching your research and your health in general. And in the long term, it actually makes you less efficient. So you're not really doing yourself any favors on any level. So make sure you eat proper food that really nourishes your body and gives you the strength and the energy that you need. Drink enough water, get enough rest and deep sleep, and move your body daily. These are very simple, very obvious things, but they can make a tremendous amount of difference to your mental well-being as well as to your physical health, and ultimately to the efficacy and productivity within your research. If you work from home, it's all the more important that you establish boundaries between work and private life. And this is something that possibly all of us are dealing with now that we're in lockdowns and we're dealing with the pandemic still. So one thing you can do is to decide what area in your home is going to be completely work-free, where you will not bring any of your work into that space. You could also make a decision, for example, not to check your emails after a certain time. Include activities in your life and in your physical home space that are the complete opposite of anything that you would do in your academic life. For example, things that don't involve staring at a screen, where there aren't any rules for success or failure, and where you can just be creative and explore your own personal interests. Work free time into each day. Schedule it if you absolutely must. If you don't plan to have this free time and this rest time, you will inevitably try to squeeze in one more email or get on another call. You really shouldn't at all feel guilty about your free time or for taking time off. And if your colleagues insist that you must be 100% available at all times, please don't feel that you have to accept this culture and to normalize it. Don't be ashamed for setting boundaries and maintaining them. Every workplace does have certain guidelines in place for the maximum number of hours that you should be working in a week and for allowing you to take time off daily, weekly, and annually. Try to also create a routine for yourself for things like when you'll get up, when you'll eat, when you'll go to sleep. Having a daily routine really is simply just about having a system for planning and doing your tasks. Planning at least on a monthly, weekly, and daily level is important. Too many academics tend to overfill their days with tasks and overestimate their capacity to get things done. And then they end up feeling extremely frustrated because they weren't able to achieve everything that they set out to do on that day. So keep your to-do list realistic. Decide on maybe just 2 or 3 main things that you need to get done each day and be happy if you get them done. Celebrate that small win. Congratulate yourself. Spend time prioritizing and planning tasks over the week or the month so that you don't feel that you have to get it all done in one day. One thing that's quite useful to bear in mind is to allow yourself flexibility. You're creating organization, but not rigidity. So allow that flexibility. Make sure that you work in buffer times into your plans so that you can have space in case there are any unexpected changes or if something takes longer than you predict. Now, if there is one thing that's going to make a huge difference to your well-being, it will be learning to say no. A lot of really caring, diligent, hardworking people in academia often struggle with saying no, and that means that they end up taking on a lot more work that they don't need to, or for which they are not going to get any proper recognition. So again, drawing your boundaries and staying firm to them is essential. Furthermore, refusing to do something that isn't your job isn't actually the real problem. For many academics, the real problem is experiencing the guilt that follows from saying no to something. So another part of learning to say no is that you also have to be prepared to maybe feel bad for saying no. And that's okay. That feeling will lessen when you allow and accept it, and as you do it more and more often. As you say no more and more, you'll get more and more comfortable with that feeling. To start with, though, you can get more comfortable with saying no by preparing and practicing ahead. So if you're expecting someone is going to ask you to do something, you can prepare an email template with some ways to say no, or you can prepare mentally and practice with a friend to decide what you would say in that situation. Secondly, be careful of not falling into a trap of negotiating or letting yourself be convinced into doing something. Just stay firm, hold your ground, and keep repeating over and over that you are not available and you cannot do this job at this time. Finally, you might feel guilty or selfish, like I said, or you might even feel sorry for the person that you've turned down. Just remember that it is okay to feel these things. It's perfectly normal and human. But the key thing to remember is that you don't have to act on these feelings or react to them. Don't be guilt-tripped into doing something just because not doing them will make you feel guilty or selfish or uncomfortable. Again, like I said, the more you learn to say no and stand your ground and be firm with your boundaries, the easier it'll get and the more and more comfortable you'll feel with saying no. Also, make it a part of your daily ritual to reach out to other people. If you work fully from home now, especially, there are still plenty of academic communities online that offer peer support, or you could use social media to reach out to other scholars. Digital communication, I know it really doesn't replace physical interactions, but it can help a great deal just to know that there's a community of like-minded people out there and that you're not alone. Remember to also take care of your connections with your friends and your family. You might have to reduce your socializing from time to time during busy work periods, but loneliness and the lack of support in the long term can be very difficult to handle. So make sure you're staying connected and keeping in touch as often as possible. Now, if taking care of your well-being feels difficult or a challenge and it feels like there's too many things to do in a day, then just start with one small thing at a time. After about 3 weeks of doing it consistently, that small habit will start to sink in well enough so that you can then move on to the next habit. So break your self-care activities into small, manageable chunks. So, for example, instead of setting yourself a big goal to exercise for 1 full hour every day, maybe you can break it down into smaller, manageable activities like going for a walk or just doing an enjoyable 20-minute YouTube exercise video. So, just start somewhere so that you can send yourself a positive, affirmative message to yourself and to others that your well-being does matter and that you're taking the steps that you need to look after yourself. Often, we always start to only pay attention to our well-being when we're already starting to suffer or we have severe symptoms such as sleep issues or anxiety. Now, taking care of these symptoms as they arise is important, of course, but you really shouldn't be waiting to get to this point before you start to take care of your well-being. Work-life balance, taking care of your basic bodily needs, building up your self-esteem, and nourishing social connections are activities that you should try to incorporate into your daily routine. And they should be guiding principles for a healthy life for everyone, not just for academics. Remember that well-being is a continuous process. It's not just a single act. It's not just something you do once and that's it. There's really nothing to be ashamed of if you are struggling with mental health, and we do need to act together consistently and over time to start to rebuild a culture where mental health is given importance and that we take care of it together while we're working together in academia. So in short, really, I want you to go away remembering to be your own best friend. Talk to yourself, give yourself the advice and the care that you would to your best friend or to somebody else. We're often so much kinder to other people than we are to ourselves and turn all the harshness and the pressures onto ourselves in a way that we would never do to a close friend or a family. Don't be your own worst enemy, okay? There is nobody who is punishing you as hard as you probably are doing to yourself. Take one step at a time. Like I said, just take small steps if it feels too overwhelming at first, and never be afraid of reaching out for help. There should be help in your university and in your community around you, so don't be afraid to draw on that support. We've now reached the end of the training part of our webinar. So before we move on to questions, I'm just going to give you a quick summary of what we've covered. So we started by looking at an overview of mental health in academia today, what's happening, the situation as it is, and acknowledging the fact that it is a problem, that there are lots of people in academia who are struggling with extreme stress and mental health issues. We then looked at how to understand imposter syndrome, and we looked at some definitions of what that means. And then we also looked at how to tackle imposter syndrome, some steps that you can take to recognize if that's happening in your life and what you can do to overcome it or to address it as it arises. And finally, I've also shared various practices that you can start to adopt to support your own overall well-being and good mental health. Thank you again so much for joining our webinar and for staying up to this point. You should receive an attendance certificate within 24 hours of completing this webinar. And as a token of our appreciation, we're also really pleased to offer you today a special discount for any of the services offered by Charlesworth Author Services. So please enter the special code webinar G9 at the checkout to receive a 10% discount off any future purchases that you'd like to purchase from us. This code will be valid until the end of December 2021. You can view a full range of our services on our website, www.cwauthors.com, or feel free to email our team at helpdesk@cwauthors.com if you'd like more information. Okay, we now have time for questions. So if you have anything that you would like to ask me, or if you have any further, anything you'd like to discuss further, please pop your questions into the chat box so that I can see them. And I have about 10 minutes to answer any questions that you might have. So anything at all that we've discussed today about imposter syndrome or well-being in academia, please feel free to pop your questions in and I'll see about answering them. So while I wait for any questions to come through, I'll deal with a question that we get quite a lot in terms of well-being and work-life balance. Now, it's quite common, for example, for a lot of researchers to also have caring responsibilities, and especially researchers who are also parents who have kids at home, and especially now in COVID times and in lockdown, a lot of kids are having to be homeschooled. They're at home 24 hours a day with you, the researcher, and you're having to do your work as well as entertain and look after your kids. So a question that comes up quite a lot is, how do I work remotely from home with two kids that spend at least some part or all of the day at home with me? Especially there are lots of people who can't afford nannies or extra care. So obviously having these distractions can really start to affect their concentration levels and just not having the time and the space to do the work that they need to do. So what I would say is that this issue really it's not just about mental health issues, but really more concerns the practical day-to-day setting where you do your work and how you do your work. So, for example, have a conversation with your manager or your supervisor or your PI at your university about the situation. Just be honest and frank with them about it, and they might be able to offer you some workable solutions. Do you also maybe know of other colleagues with families and who are also struggling with similar issues, or who have somehow successfully organized their working practices from home? It might be useful to talk to them and see what they do, what practices they incorporate, or how they manage their kids. Now, I'm sure that you've probably already tried many things to try to get better concentration and time and space to work, and you might already know a lot of these things, but I'm just going to share them again just in case someone else benefits from them. So one of the things that you can start doing is to set rules with your kids that everybody knows about and is aware of. So you could make it clear to them when you have your working time and when you should not be bothered. Especially if they're older kids, if they're school-going kids, they should be old enough to be able to spend time alone and or with each other. And as long as you are very clear about the rules and that they are understood clearly by everyone, and you hold to those rules, you make sure you stick to those rules yourself, though you're in most cases perhaps you can also decide and plan together how your kids will entertain themselves while you have your working time. So for example, could your working time align with their homework time, for example? And again, it's really important that you, as the parent and as the person who has set the rules, try to stick to the planned working hours and to the guidelines as much as possible. So when it's time to work, you really do hold your ground and work in that time. And then when it's time to relax and play, you give your full attention to your children and stop working. Don't be half paying attention to your kids, but still also trying to write another email. So if your kids see this and they understand that, okay, work time is work time, playtime is playtime, and they feel that they do get enough of your time and attention when you say you will give it to them, then they will also be more willing to understand the times when you need to work. I hope that helps a little bit. Another quite common question, I'll just finish off with one more quick question, is a question around criticism. So, for example, a lot of people struggle with getting criticism for their work. They feel that it's a huge hit, and they immediately kind of default into thinking that, oh my God, I failed. I'm not doing well. I'm a failure. I'm not going to be able to progress. I can't succeed. And they tailspin into this anxiety or even depression. So first of all, I want to say that if you do have this question and this issue, please don't worry. This is a really common thing that a lot of researchers experience at some point or other. Now, criticism, of course, is never easy to take, but it's really, really important to differentiate between what is being said and how it's being said. There is criticism where the person giving it is just there to show, they're just saying it just to show off their superiority or to try to put you down somehow. But there is also the kind of criticism that is constructive and that's coming from a genuine desire to help you improve your work, or to perhaps to try to understand your work better so that they can help you more. So what's important is to try to ascertain exactly where that person is coming from. So for example, maybe you can just ask them directly, say directly to the person who's giving you that criticism, I'm not sure what you mean with this comment. Can you please help me to understand? And it will become quite clear quite early on whether they are genuinely trying to understand your work better and to offer you genuinely helpful suggestions, or whether they are there just to kind of show off or to, push their own ego around. So yeah, differentiate between that. If somebody is being arrogant and trying to put you down, just walk away from that situation. Just be very polite and say thank you for your comment and walk away. You don't have to engage with that at all. And where somebody is genuinely wanting to help, don't see that as something negative. See it as a way to further improve your work and to become an even better researcher in the future. See it almost just as neutral feedback rather than as anything negative. Okay, so unfortunately, we are out of time now, and I'm not going to be able to take any more questions. But if you do have any further questions, or if you think of something afterwards from this presentation, or if you would simply like to know more about what Charlesworth Author Services offers, please get in touch with us. You can email us at helpdesk@cwauthors.com. Or feel free to visit our website anytime, www.cwauthors.com. Just a quick reminder as well that you have this discount code that is valid all the way until the end of this year, webinar G9, that you can use for any of our services on our website. So please do get in touch if you have any queries, and if not, I wish you a very good day, and thank you so much again for joining us. I wish you great researcher, well-being and mental health, and joyful, happy, productive research days ahead. Thank you very much, and good evening and goodbye.